Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell, mom of 18 and executive director of the Doula Co-op of Nevada. With more than 15 years in birth work, I've had the privilege of walking beside families through life's transitions. My work centers on connection, community, and amplifying voices that too often go unheard. Each of these episodes is an honest conversation about the messy, beautiful, and transformative experiences that shape us as parents and as people. I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to the incredible guests who show up with courage and authenticity to share their stories with us. Let's dive right in. Welcome to the podcast. Today I have with me Gabriela Rosa from Australia. And so we both have a sexy accent today, which is great.
We like that. There you go.
We do like that. Jump in and start sharing your parenting journey with us.
Look, my parenting journey was not what I expected. And I think so many parenting journeys aren't what one expects. First of all, I was told when I was 18 that I would never have children. So I had this very blasé gynecologist over the phone telling me that, you have polycystic ovarian disease. And I'm like, as I'm thinking, am I about to die? Like, what is happening here, you know? And I actually asked, it's like, is that very serious? And he goes, no, you're probably just never going to have children. I'm like, oh, that's so much better. You know, like a little bit taken aback. But again, because I was 18, I didn't really think of it at that point as something that was devastating from the perspective that I was very focused on studying. I was studying university. I was, really wanting to build a career regardless. And I remember so clearly thinking at the time, well, if it never happens, I'll just focus on my career. Like that was kind of the 18-year-old me mindset. And, fast forward many years later, in fact, 10 years later, had met my partner. I told him about this, prognosis of potentially never being able to have children. And he's like, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And of course, I then studied naturopathic medicine. And at the time, I didn't think that it had influenced me all that much. But as it turned out, I started treating people who wanted to improve their chances of taking home a healthy baby. And, by the time that I decided that we wanted to have kids, I was already, it was 12, 13 years after that phone call. And I had already been working in this field for quite some time. And I essentially had been preparing myself, whether I was consciously aware or just, kind of focusing on my health. It essentially just turned out that my first child was conceived first try. And so, yeah, exactly. So I was like, oh, there you go, infertility, all that. Yeah. So it really was just like this, okay, we're ready to start. All right, let's start. And of course, I had been tracking my cycles for 2 years already. So I knew exactly that my patterns, although lengthened, like I had a lengthened cycle, but actually, and, if you don't track your cycles, you never know. You will think, okay, PCOS, it's irregular. It comes, sometimes and sometimes it doesn't and whatever. And I remember because I was tracking my cycles for quite some time that I knew my ovulation was like 30 days, 33 days. It was just very easy. So, and I was very familiar with my fertile signs. So we tried and we conceived. And so it was like, oh, okay, that was pretty relatively easy. And that was great up until the point where this child is being born. Where, you kind of go, okay, well, that was not so hard after all. They didn't tell me that, they told me it was going to be really hard. I expected it to be hard and it wasn't. But then when you get pregnant, there's that immediate thought of like, is my child going to be healthy? Is everything going to be okay? And as you go through your 9 months of pregnancy, every little thing is like, oh my God, is everything okay? Are we all good? And, I had a 40-hour labor. That should have been the sign of things to come. Had a wonderful doula and, I was very supported, but it was a very long labor. And by the end, I had gone in with my birth plan of like, I do not want to have a C-section. Whatever happens, don't let me have a C-section. By 35 hours, I was like, just give me a C-section right now. Like, I'm done. And so they're like, oh, the surgery room, the OR is actually busy. Sorry, you're just going to have to wait. I'm like, what? I'm ready for a C-section. So anyway, I didn't get a C-section. They ended up inducing me because for like 20 hours, I was still 1 centimeter dilated. And it was just like, what the actual life of me? And so long story short, this child ended up being born vaginally and all was well, cone head and all. And breastfeeding was not easy. It was one of those really difficult. And I was very adamant that I wanted to breastfeed. That was one thing that, for me was really important. And I just, with PCOS, it is harder and you get less milk production and there's just so many complicating factors. So I just remember just, having bleeding nipples for the first 4 months and just like no milk and just, but still like literally pumping every 15 minutes, every hour, throughout the entire time that I was awake, getting enough milk to feed him and like being so stressed about the whole thing. But then eventually 4 months rolled in and it just kind of like became a lot easier. But then at that point, it was the fact that, okay, now there's something else going on because we can't put this child down and he just keeps crying. And it's just this whole, and we didn't realize until much later. I thought that it was just because he just was, first baby, you just never really know what's going on. Took him to the pediatrician, everything is fine, like all of those things. And we never really did find out what was happening with him. I ended up hiring a mothercraft nurse and she helped me with learning how to settle him a bit better. Finally, at about 9 months, he starts to, like he used to sleep 20 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes all the way through the day and night, no matter what. There was no long periods of sleep. And so I, by the 4 month period, was like, what is my name? Like, I was like, oh my God. So, when you asked me what was my baby journey, my parenthood journey, that's how it started. And I was like, oh my God. I had originally, before I even had my diagnosis, thought that, okay, maybe I'd like to have 4 children, like that would be nice. I'm one of two. A large family would be lovely. I had one and I was like, that's it. Like, I do not want to have any more children at all. That's how it started.
Right. And it's crazy because I always feel like with pregnancy and postpartum, it's like roulette, right? There are 12 side effects or symptoms. Everybody's going to get 7. We don't know which 7 you're going to get.
Which ones?
So you have to sort of prepare for everything. And then, oh, by the way, there's a couple that nobody ever told you about. And we think, oh, my body naturally can deliver and naturally breastfeed. Sure, it can.
Yeah.
That's not without challenge.
Technically.
On paper, it looks real good. But I can't believe you made it through 4 hours. I have 4 months of breastfeeding.
Honestly.
Through 35 hours.
It was, and yet it was intense.
We do.
We do, exactly. And, and then you kind of like, you come out the other side and you go, but I have to say, like, after 9 months of not sleeping, I was like, that's it. 1 child is what we're getting, and it took me quite some time to be convinced that we would go for a second. And, eventually I was like, okay, fine. We'll try for a second. Tried the first time, it didn't happen. I was like, okay, you know what? If this doesn't happen in the next try, I'm giving up.
You're spoiled at this point.
Exactly. And the thing about it was that, by the time I actually had thought, okay, I do want to try again, to the time that my cycles actually got back, like that I got back my cycles and that they became regular, it was 17 months. And so, technically, if I didn't know what I knew, I would have been trying to get pregnant month after month and not actually getting a positive pregnancy test. And I would have, been labeled infertile because I knew that, okay, hang on a second. As much as I want to try, the conditions and getting pregnant is just not going to happen. And I knew that because of my experience as a clinician treating people for infertility. So at least that was one thing that, again, technically, yes, I was infertile for 17 months, but it was this idea that, okay, I know what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't feeling overwhelmed or, unsure and uncertain about, hang on, can my body ever do this again? I was more like, okay, you know what? Just take a step back. We have to work again on regulating cycles, getting things back in order. And then, of course, we did. First try didn't work. Second try, I got pregnant again, And so it was like, all right, this is okay. But what was interesting about the second, and the funniest thing, the second time, the same kind of, noises started going on. Like, pre-labor for 2 days, overnight waking up, nothing happens during the day. I'm like, you know what? I'm done with this business. I don't want to play this story anymore. Induction right now, obstetrician, let's go. So literally so I went through the whole weekend, this whole business, no sleeping at night at all. Come morning, no contractions whatsoever. I'm like, you know what? Enough of this. So I literally call my obstetrician on Monday and go, I will not be going through another 40-hour labor like I did last time. This is what happened again. And he goes, just come in, let's examine you, blah, blah, blah. Again, a centimeter dilated. I'm like, hospital right now. So he goes, he calls the hospital, goes, I've got this patient. I'm going to send her in. He goes, do you have your bag here? I said, no, I have to go home and get it. He goes, okay, well, it should be there in about an hour. I'm like, great. So I arrive at 4:30. By 7:30, I'm holding my baby. It
What?
was like, yeah, they induced me, and it was that quick. I was like, okay, great.
How many weeks were you at that point?
I was at 40.
Okay, so you were term.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is all I was
That's
like, you know
great.
what? We're not doing this. We're not doing this business of because that's exactly what happened with my first. Is like I had 2 days of pre-labor, then everything stopped. Then I started labor, then 20 hours of 1 centimeter dilation. I'm like, no,
I'm tired.
no.
I'm done.
I'm tired. I was tired already. Especially with the second. And the thing that nobody warns you, I think that this is really the interesting thing. You said, you would expect that and your body knows, but actually you don't. I felt, I really felt like, of course I can handle this. Like I'm a high functioning person. I handle so many things in my life, like all of these things. Honestly, nothing could have prepared me for what a child brings into one's life, and that really difficult first path of not being able to breastfeed, child never sleeping, all of that. And so with the second, I thought, by 15 weeks, I knew I was having another boy. So at least I was happy with that, because I was like, you know what? There's economies of scale here. I don't have to buy another toy. I don't have to buy another piece of clothing. I've got everything always well. So I'm thinking, okay, we're going to breeze through this. Yeah, he's not going to sleep, but, it's going to be fine. And so I just go in with that mindset that economies of scale is a thing when you have a baby. And I was rudely shocked to find out that, no, it isn't a thing. It is literally double the work. Yeah. And no matter if it's the same sex or not, it's still going to be double the work. And then you have a toddler that you have to run around with, a baby you need to breastfeed. So it was chaos and mayhem for, a little while there.
I love what you said, though. You said, no matter what preparation you have, this is so much work. And you talk to people who are like, no, I've read the books, I've taken the classes, I've done the things. Those things are great to do. It's great to be informed and educated, have options, to feel confident in that part of it. But in no way does it actually prepare you, because again, you don't know what 7 out of the 12 things you're going to get. And every single time it's different.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, I had the second one and I was like, I'm so great at this. I'm awesome. And then the third one came and I was like, why did anyone think I could be a mother? Like, just the third one for me. And after it was easy, but no amount of preparation prepares you. No amount.
It's really interesting. And not even having gone through it before prepares you, because each child is so different, like that's the thing and that was the thing that I really noticed. And with my 2 kids, like I ended up having only 2, not 4 after all. And because I was like, okay, you know what? No, really, I cannot
really are done.
any more of this. Yeah, we really, like now this is it, you know? And so, but it's what's fascinating to me is how their personalities is so completely, and I mean
Oh,
opposite, you know, like completely different. And you know what's really interesting, and you know, having the second also helped me learn a little bit more about the first, because what ended up happening was that the first was born, and that child, from the first night I brought him home, slept for 5.5 hours. I'm like, what is happening? Why did I get given the first, you know, that first child that never slept ever? And now I've got the perfect child. And then, of course, but I had my mothercraft nurse completely ready, right? I was like, day one, you
right.
please come to my place. Because I was like, I was not having that whole business again. And so I had her come and, you know, she said to me, she said, look, this is really great. He's obviously sleeping well. This is wonderful. If he and we had an inkling that my first son had silent reflux because we couldn't find anything wrong with him, but we also didn't have a way to kind of figure it out that it was or it wasn't, because he wasn't vomiting, he wasn't, you know, like he couldn't hear anything. So it was this whole really kind of weird, not clear thing that was going on, right? And when my second was born and he used to sleep through the night and all of that, she said to me, literally day one, she said, listen, if it is silent reflux, obviously he's doing really well now, but at 4 weeks, their sphincter gets a little bit loose. And so you will start to get him have symptoms like Jake used to have, like the first one used to have. And so just watch for that. And sure enough, at 4 weeks, this child starts doing like regressing and doing exactly what my first son used to do. The first thing I did was like, okay, you know what? Let's go to the pediatrician. And he then further assessed with that lens in place. And we decided to actually medicate and do a test to see if, you know, it really was reflux. And of course, when we found out that it was like, okay, we have to put him on medication. And he was on medication for the first 11 months and, of course, developed fabulous sleep skills. And to this day, I find their personalities so different as a result of that early start, you know. And Jake, which is my first son, he's a lot more like, I mean, he's already a lot more energetic and, you know, he's a go, go, go child all the time. Whereas my other son is a lot more chill and relaxed and, you know, like, we'll take it as it comes kind of attitude, you know. So it's fascinating to see, and how those early days, in my mind, you know, have kind of shaped their little personalities to this stage. So, but yeah, I don't think that I could have been prepared for this, because you hear people. I remember sitting at 4 a.m., you know, between 2 and 4, breastfeeding and settling a crying baby and thinking, why is it that nobody has told me about this? You know, and you're like, everybody tells you about this. You just don't think it's going to happen to you. And so you don't connect the dots.
I think there are, well, I think even if and when people tell you, you think it will be different for you and you have
Mm-hmm.
no context, right? It's
Mm,
like
mm.
telling somebody what salt tastes like that's never tasted salt. It's not really possible to know how you're going to feel about a child of your own. Like I remember one of my daughters
Yes.
saying, I've been a nanny all these years and I've done this. And so I think I'm going to rock being a mom. And didn't say a word, did not say a word. Because
Because
like,
why
girl,
would you?
you are going to be slapped hard by the, and she was because it's not. But even if I had to, and also people like to tell you their worst horror stories. They see you pregnant, and they're like,
Yeah.
I tore up to
Oh,
my
yeah.
lungs. That like women do not support each other in a
Yeah.
positive way. And we don't talk about things from being embarrassed to put pads on the conveyor belt at the store. Like half of the population are women. We either are going to are having our periods. Why is this embarrassing? Why don't we talk about it? There should
Yeah.
be no embarrassment there at all.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
but from that point, we do not talk about this stuff. You
Yeah.
you got into like the infertility thing prior to having babies. And I know you said like that it made you feel better the second time around because you knew you weren't
Yeah.
infertile. You knew. How has having kids, how has it changed over the years, both from before you had kids to after you had kids, and then just with time, how has it changed?
Which part specifically?
Well, I know I went through infertility 35 years ago. And my
Yeah.
daughter, also, who's turning 34, was going, they haven't changed anything in 30 years, like the procedure, the process, but I'm sure that if you're looking in the right places, that things have changed. Like you have diagnostic tools. I literally used to do basal body temperature and sex every other day and you'd record everything. It was terrible. It was terrible because they don't tell you like I think women.
That hasn't changed, Jennifer. That's
Ugh,
still the same.
it's like, why? And why don't they take every woman who's going through infertility and tell her she should see a therapist?
Oh gosh, yeah, that also hasn't changed. Um,
No, it just okay. So I was hoping you'd be like, oh, this has changed.
it's a new life. Now, look, what I will say is this. I think that when it comes to infertility, what we deal with is a very fragmented system with many misaligned interests. And I think that that is really where we need to begin that part of the conversation, because we think that, as women, we're going to go to our doctor, they're going to lay out an entire path and plan of all the things you need to think about and the things that you need to get tested for and the things that you need to be aware of preemptively and in advance of something coming up, and that they're going to give you a map to say, okay, you are here and you're going to walk and you're going to get to this point, and when you're here, this is what you're going to do, and then you're going to go to this other point, and when you're here, that's what you're going to do. None of that happens. And it doesn't happen because in primary care, what happens? You go to a doctor, you have a 2-minute consultation. And in fact, by 5 minutes, they're like rushing you out,
Yep.
right? And that is not a doctor problem. That is a system problem,
Mhm.
because there is an underserved situation that happens throughout the entire world where we don't have enough care for all the people that need it or the level of care that is desirable. Because from a public health standpoint and from a public health systems standpoint, you have to do the absolute minimum for the largest possible number of people. That's how population levels, infrastructure, and interventions work, which means that on an individual level, and there is the additional challenge to this, is that by 2 years of trying, 96.3% of people have conceived and are on the way to have their baby, which
Wow.
means that, exactly, so that is the vast, largest
Wow.
number of the population. So what happens is that when you go to a doctor and you've been trying for 5 minutes or 6 months, and you're young, and there's no real major indication for health conditions or disease or pathology in any way, you literally are just going to be given the, okay, cool, so let's do some kind of basic blood tests and just keep trying, and if it doesn't happen within the next 6 months, come back and see me. And it's then at that point that a doctor has to, or it is guided as per the guidelines, to check, is she ovulating? Does she have clear fallopian tubes?
Yep.
Does she have a uterus that can house a pregnancy? And do we have sperm? You see, so
Right.
literally that's it. That is all that is required for a doctor to say, yes, this person has been assessed correctly.
Okay.
Now, that's all well and good if you are part of that 96.3% that will conceive and take home a healthy pregnancy. But if you're part of the 4% that don't, what happens is that we're still using a population level lens to address now what is pathological and difficult and not straightforward,
Right.
with the same tools and strategies that we use for everybody else who gets pregnant easily. So it makes no sense whatsoever. And then you add to that the fact that now we have pharmaceutical companies and private equity investing in IVF clinics. So it becomes a situation of like, okay, more cycles equals more profit. So IVF has become the golden standard therapy. And so what happens is you have been trying for 6 months, come back to see me in another 6 months if you're under 35. If you're over 35, you have been trying for 6 months, you need to go and do IVF.
Wow.
And so that's how it is now. That has changed.
Okay.
And
That's
so
horrible. That's not a good change. Okay.
no, it's not a good change at all. But that is how it is in terms of like the structure of the healthcare system. And so basically, If people aren't aware of that, they think that, okay, well, then I need IVF because that's what I'm being told. That's what needs to happen next. And the reality is that that's very rarely, very seldom what actually needs to happen next. You know, there are many steps that get missed because the healthcare system does not prioritize investigations, further testing of people who haven't yet had failed IVF cycles or who haven't yet had miscarriages.
Right.
And you have to have 3 miscarriages before you start investigating.
Oh my
So
gosh.
there is precisely, who wants to have even 1, let alone 3, right? And if you are older and you're trying to get pregnant, a miscarriage can literally take a year of your fertility potential out of the equation, because what happens is this: if you have been trying for 8 weeks and you basically miscarry at if you've been pregnant for 8 weeks and you miscarry at 8 weeks, it takes your body about another 8 weeks to get back to baseline so you can start trying again. So then let's say it takes you 6 months to get pregnant. We're 10 months down the track.
Right.
Let's say you then do get pregnant and you have another 8-week miscarriage. You're 12 months down the line. Now, if you're 42, you don't have 12 months of delay in your fertility window. You don't have time to have 3 miscarriages before you start investigating. You have to be proactive,
Right.
because if you're not, you can run out of time to have a baby entirely, you see. But the healthcare system doesn't approach it that way because it is literally set in a protocol format that is like, if this, then. And the if is, if you are a certain age, then you go and do IVF. If you like, and there is no other pathway to actually go, all right, where are we at? And then there's another problem here, which is once you do finally get to a point where, you know, you go and you do IVF and it doesn't work, you then are told a very interesting thing. Oh, it's a numbers game. Just keep trying. Hang on a second. Numbers for who? Because I see profit on the other side of the equation. But for the patient individually, who on average is paying in the United States out of pocket between 15 to 30,000 US dollars, those numbers add up pretty quickly into not being able to try anymore. And so when you are either not investigating people properly or investigating people and comparing their results with population level ranges, that is for people who don't have a problem, well, guess what? You're leaving a lot of information that you could utilize to make change that is actually an improvement on the table. You are investing in the wrong kind of approach to actually, you know, take home a baby. When what happens after 2 cycles? You've spent your, you know, $30,000 to $60,000 and you can't afford to continue. Do you just decide that, okay, well, I've given it my best and now I'm just going to have a life without a child because nobody has properly investigated you or treated you for the things that are found? You know, sometimes I have situations where, you know, I have patients who have been trying for 14 years who I go in and test adequately and properly and find that they both have chlamydia. And I'm thinking, and they've had 2 failed IVF cycles, 6 failed IUI cycles, and I find chlamydia on year 14? How is that even possible? So there's a lot of issues, you know, Jennifer. That's the.
And it's with all of women's healthcare. I know we're half the population, but we're not half of the money that gets put into, you know, research. And I know doctors have a really limited. There was a doctor that talked to me recently and said, "Oh yeah, the amount of nutrition training I get is just a couple hours."
Oh yeah,
In school. I'm like, yeah, here you
good.
are the expert, right? Like they don't actually have sufficient training. So a dietitian or nutritionist who is a non-medical provider actually has more education, but is dismissed because they don't have the doctorate. And I find that one of many incredibly frustrating things. And also, like, I don't think with infertility, they did a lot of blood work on me, but they never did a full hormone panel.
Wow. See what I mean? Like, how's that even possible?
But you know what? It's because it's hormone related, or put you on the proper medication. Like, are you estrogen low? Is it a progesterone issue? Is it testosterone? What's out of balance, out of whack? Or is it dietary? Is it obesity? Is it like, there's a million other things before you jump into IVF. $60,000. Do you know how much healthcare diagnostically? I know you do. Like, if you actually went from a research, figure out the reason why diagnostic perspective, you wouldn't need a sixth of that money. And that's
precisely. And that's exactly why I get so frustrated. In fact, I get so frustrated about this that I created something for people to be able to navigate this whole situation, because what your doctor isn't testing but should is real. There's so much that they should be testing that they're not. And patients don't know, because what happens? This is what happens. Patient goes into the clinic, into the doctor's office. The doctor does those four tests that I talked about, right? And then the patient receives the results and they go, and unless there is some major pathology, you're not going to find anything other than normal results. Right. Yes, you do have clear fallopian tubes. Yes, you do have a uterus. Yes, you are, hormonally cycling. Okay. And yes, we have some sperm. Great, right? And so what happens is that gets translated into, we've done all the tests and everything is normal. Hang on a second. There are so many more tests that will actually pinpoint what is not normal. Because you see, what's normal is this: have sex, get pregnant, have a baby. That's normal. We're no longer having this conversation. If you are having sex, not getting pregnant, and not having a baby, that is a deviation from normal. However you want to call it, right, it is not what is meant to happen. Therefore, what we need to figure out is not what somebody's doing well and what's actually great. What we need to figure out is, okay, where are the obstacles?
Right.
Because unless we figure out the obstacles, we are going to continue having the same BS conversation, really, right? Which is like, oh, yeah, okay, everything is okay. And it's like, hang on, how is that even possible? Like, after 5 failed IVF cycles, you're being told everything looks normal and it's a numbers game? Really?
That is the
weird. And we haven't had any testing done, and we're still missing, half of what it is that you would look at when we're talking about systemic inflammation, when we're talking about implantation failure, when we're talking about early miscarriage and chemical pregnancy, and none of those tests have been done. And you're just told, everything looks good. Let's just keep trying. Like, where are we looking in good? Because for me, what is good is I try to get pregnant, I have a baby. That's good. Anything else other than that, we have to figure out, okay, what is getting in the way?
I have so many links for you, but you have your website, and then like social media. You also have an infertility diagnostic tool that just released. Can you talk about that a little bit? And then you have the Fertility Breakthrough links. And you also have a podcast that's out of season, but that's about sex, which is my favorite.
That,
so just have to throw it in.
It is absolutely about sex.
Infertility diagnostic instead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, there's a couple of things that I think is a great place for people to start. I run a public health intervention, really, that is designed, it's completely free. It's a program that I've been running for 15 years, and it literally helps people to orient themselves into okay, what are the things that I can do to optimize my chances of taking home a healthy baby, especially when things haven't been easy or straightforward? That's called the Fertility Challenge. The Fertility Challenge is a free event. People can participate. It goes over 14 days. It's taken over 204,000 people in more than 111 countries through it. So, there's a lot of benefit. And I'm very passionate about that program because I am focused on improving the level of public health that is out there for patients who are struggling with infertility, miscarriage, failed treatments, because I honestly don't think it should be the way that it is. And so that's that's a great place for people to start. The other place where people can start is I've made my book, Fertility Breakthrough, Overcoming Infertility and Recurrent Miscarriage, available free on Spotify and YouTube. So people can listen to the whole book. It's an over 300-page book that really guides people to going, okay, where are the places where I can influence, that actually have research-backed information on what to do, because this is another thing that I find, there's a lot of noise online, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation. It's horrific. So I've taken on to do public health education on Instagram. It's Gabriela Rosa Fertility is where people can find me, but the book is available free on Spotify and YouTube, and I can send you the link for that as well.
Yeah.
And then finally, we've just released today, actually, this is a brand new thing called what your doctor should be testing, but isn't. In fact, it's what your doctor isn't testing but should. And that is something that is out today. People can find the link either on the show notes or they can find it on my Instagram. It's rosa.institute/tests. So it's easy to remember, rosa.institute/tests. And, that is the map that I wish that many more people, before they go and do, I've had patients do 20 failed IVF cycles who come to us and they conceive naturally. Talk about resource intensive, on that level. But, so before people go and do all of these very heavy intervention approaches, let's get answers first. Let's find out what are the obstacles that are getting in the way. What are the things that are not being tested that should be tested, so that you can actually have clarity that changes clinical outcomes. That is the goal. And so this is something that people can access now.
Oh, Gabriela, thank you. Thank you for being on and sharing your story. And thank you for the work that you've done for over 15 years, because it is agonizing how challenging it is. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. So great to be here. Thank you for having me.